I sat at my parents' dining table, my hands trembling as I stared at the brass keys in my palm. My father's fist slammed down so hard the coffee cups rattled. "You'll hand over those keys right now, Francis," he shouted, his face red with anger. My sister Courtney sat across from me, smuggled beside her fiancé Brad, already scrolling through renovation ideas on her phone. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, telling me I was being selfish, that this was what family did for each other. Dad leaned forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone. "A good daughter sacrifices for her sister's happiness. This is Courtney's wedding gift. It's what a good daughter does." I looked down at the keys to the house I had spent 3 years saving from foreclosure. The house that was supposed to be my future, my security, my dream. My fingers closed around the cold metal, and I slowly placed them on the table between us. The silence that followed felt like it could shatter glass. My father's hand started to reach across the table toward the keys, but something in me snapped. I pulled my hand back at the last second, my palm covering the keys again. "Wait," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can I speak to you and Mom alone for just 5 minutes?" Courtney's perfectly manicured hand slapped the table. "Absolutely not. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of me and Brad. We're about to be married, Francis. We don't keep secrets." Brad nodded, his arm sliding around Courtney's shoulders in a gesture that was probably meant to look protective, but just came across as possessive. I had never liked Brad, though I could never quite put my finger on why. He was handsome enough, successful enough on paper, but something about the way he looked at things, at people, at my family's house, made my skin crawl. "Just 5 minutes," I repeated, looking only at my parents. "Please." My mother glanced at my father, who let out an exasperated sigh. "Fine. 5 minutes. Courtney, Brad, why don't you wait in the living room?" "But Dad," Courtney whined, drawing out the word like she had when she was 7 and didn't get her way. "5 minutes," he said firmly. Courtney huffed, grabbing her phone and her purse, and stalked out of the dining room with Brad trailing behind her. I waited until I heard them settle on the couch, their voices low murmurs that told me Courtney was absolutely listening at the door. I took a deep breath and looked at my parents. Really looked at them. My father was 57, my mother 55. They looked tired, older than they should. The lines around my mother's mouth had deepened, and my father's hair had gone completely gray in the past year. "Do you remember?" I started, my voice steadier now. "3 years ago when you called me crying because you'd gotten the foreclosure notice?" My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Francis, we don't need to rehash ancient history." "Yes, we do," I said, "because you seem to have forgotten. You'd refinanced this house 3 times. Once for Courtney's college tuition at that private school she just had to attend. Once for her car, that brand new SUV she totaled 6 months later. And once for her business, that boutique that failed after 8 months. Your sister had dreams," my father said defensively. "And I didn't?" The words came out sharper than I intended. I was 27 years old, working as a medical billing specialist. I had my own apartment, my own life. And you called me, terrified, because the bank was taking the house. This house where you still lived, where you'd raised us. "We know what you did," my mother said quietly. "Do you? Do you really?" I leaned forward. I took a second job waitressing, nights and weekends, every shift I could get. I worked 70, sometimes 80 hours a week. I gave up sleep. I gave up dating. I gave up everything. And I made the down payment to stop the foreclosure. But the bank wouldn't approve the loan in your names. Your credit was destroyed. So I put the house in my name. It was the only way. And we've been grateful," my father started, but I held up my hand. "I spent 3 years making double payments, catching up on all the back taxes you owed, paying off the arrears. I finally paid off the last of it 1 month ago. This house is mine. Legally. Completely. 100% mine." The words hung in the air between us. My father's jaw clenched. We raised you in this house. We gave you 18 years here. It's morally ours, Francis. Legally might be different, but morally, this house belongs to this family. I felt something crack inside my chest. I never said it didn't. I planned to let you live here rent-free for the rest of your lives. I was never going to kick you out, but this house is my financial security. I've been saving to start my own medical billing company. I need this house as collateral for the business loan. I need this for my future. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time. So you're just going to throw our sacrifice in our faces? We raised you, fed you, clothed you, and I'm grateful. But I also saved your home. Doesn't that count for something? Before either of them could answer, the dining room door burst open. Courtney stood there, her face flushed, her phone clutched in her hand. I knew it. I knew you'd try to back out. Courtney, I asked for privacy, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. Privacy? She's trying to steal from us. Courtney advanced into the room, Brad right behind her. I'm 32 years old, Francis. 32. Brad and I are getting married in 3 weeks. We're starting a family. We deserve a real home, not some cramped apartment. Brad has a job, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You both have income. You could buy your own house. Brad works in sales, Courtney said, as if that explained everything. It's commission-based. We can't get approved for a mortgage right now. But we don't need to, because Mom and Dad are giving us the family home as a wedding gift. I stared at her. They can't give you what isn't theirs. Courtney's smile was triumphant and cruel. I've already told everyone. All 200 wedding guests know that Mom and Dad are giving us the family estate. I've posted pictures on social media. I've sent photos to the bridesmaids. Everyone knows. If you back out now, I'll be humiliated in front of everyone who matters. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling, then turned the screen toward me. Instagram, Facebook, wedding forums. Post after post of Courtney gushing about the incredible generosity of my amazing parents, and so blessed to start our married life in the home where I grew up. You had no right, I whispered. I had every right, Courtney shot back. Family takes care of family. Mom and Dad agree, don't you? She turned to our parents, her eyes wide and pleading. Our mother nodded immediately. Our father looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or just exhaustion. Then he nodded, too. Just this once, Francis, he said. Just this once. Put your sister first. I looked at the three of them, then at Brad, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. And I realized that nothing I said would matter. My years of sacrifice, my 70-hour work weeks, my dreams. None of it meant anything to them. They had already made their choice. I need some time to think, I managed to say. The wedding is in 3 weeks, Courtney said. Think fast. The next morning, I sat across from my best friend Amy at a coffee shop downtown, my hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. Amy was a paralegal at a small family law firm, and she'd seen her share of family disputes. Legally, she said, sliding a legal pad across the table. You're completely in the clear. The house is in your name. You made the down payment. You've made every mortgage payment for 3 years. Your parents have no claim to it whatsoever. But morally? I asked. Amy sighed. Morally is complicated, Francis. Yes, they raised you. But you also saved their home. You worked yourself to exhaustion. You put your life on hold. At some point, the scales balance. I took a sip of coffee. It had gone cold. I've been thinking about a compromise. What kind of compromise? What if I offer Courtney and Brad a rent-to-own arrangement? They pay below market rent for 10 years. And at the end, the house is theirs. I keep the asset for now. I can use it as collateral for my business loan, and they still get the house eventually. Amy tilted her head, considering. That's more than fair. That's generous, actually. Will they go for it? I don't know, but I have to try. I texted my family that afternoon, asking to meet at the same coffee shop. Neutral territory. I brought printed documents showing a payment plan I'd worked out, numbers that were more than reasonable. I felt good about it. This was a solution. This was fair. They arrived 15 minutes late. Courtney swept in first, wearing a white sundress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Brad followed, then my parents. They sat down across from me, a unified front. Before I could even open my mouth, Courtney put her hand on the table, palm down, showing off her engagement ring. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice pitched loud enough that the other customers looked over. "Brad and I are pregnant." My mother's gasp was immediate. She leaped up, rushed around the table, and threw her arms around Courtney. My father's eyes filled with tears. Actual tears. He stood and hugged Brad, clapping him on the back. I sat frozen, my carefully prepared documents, suddenly feeling very small and insignificant in my hands. "A grandbaby," my mother kept saying. "Oh, a grandbaby." When the celebration finally died down enough for them to sit again, I tried to speak. "That's wonderful news. Congratulations. I actually wanted to talk to you all about a compromise." "A compromise?" Courtney's eyes flashed. "I'm pregnant, Francis. I'm carrying your niece or nephew. And you want to talk about a compromise? Just listen," I said, sliding the papers forward. "It's a rent-to-own plan. You'd pay below market rate for 10 years, and then the house is yours. Everyone wins. You get the house. I keep the asset long enough to use it for my business loan. And in the end, the house goes to family anyway." Courtney didn't even look at the papers. A real sister wouldn't charge rent. A real sister would give freely. "Courtney, please, just look at the numbers. It's very reasonable." Brad spoke for the first time since they'd arrived. "My parents are helping pay for the wedding. Courtney's parents should help with housing. That's how families work." I stared at him. "Your parents are giving you money. I'm not Courtney's parent. I'm her sister." "A sister who has more than she needs," my mother said softly. "You have your apartment, your job, your independence. Courtney is starting a family. A baby needs stability. A baby needs parents who can provide," I countered. "Brad, you make decent money in sales. You could afford to rent while you save for a down payment." "We don't want to rent," Courtney said, her voice rising. "We don't want to save. We want what's ours. That house should have been left to both of us, but you manipulated Mom and Dad when they were vulnerable. I saved them from foreclosure." "You took advantage," Courtney hissed. "You swooped in and stole what should have been our family home." My father cleared his throat. "Francis, your sister had her chance at marriage, and it didn't work out. Remember? You dated that man, what was his name, Michael, for 5 years. You thought you'd get married, have children, but he left. These things happen. Now Courtney has her chance. This is her time." The words hit like a slap. Michael leaving had nearly destroyed me. It had happened 4 years ago, and I'd spent 2 of those years barely functioning. My family knew that. They'd seen it. And now my father was using it as a weapon. "That's not fair," I whispered. "Life isn't fair," my mother said. "But family helps family. Your little business dream can wait. A baby can't." I looked down at my papers, at the reasonable numbers, at the fair compromise I'd spent hours working out. None of them had even glanced at it. Courtney stood up, grabbing her purse. "I always knew you hated me, Francis. I always knew you were jealous. Well, guess what? Mom and Dad love me. They want me to be happy. And you can either be part of this family, or you can be alone with your precious house." She stormed out. Brad followed without a word. My parents stood more slowly. "Think about what matters, Francis," my father said. "Really think about it." They left me sitting there with my cold coffee and my useless papers. The barista came over to clear the table, saw my face, and quietly walked away. Over the next week, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Aunt Linda called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Uncle Paul said I'd always been the selfish one. Cousin Jennifer left a voicemail saying she couldn't believe I'd try to make my pregnant sister homeless. Cousin Marcus sent a text calling me heartless. I tried to explain to each of them. I sent copies of the rent-to-own proposal. I outlined everything I'd done to save the house. But Courtney had gotten to them first with her version, a version where I was a villain trying to kick a pregnant woman onto the street. My social media filled with messages, some from family, some from people I'd gone to high school with and hadn't spoken to in years. The comments ranged from disappointed to vicious. Someone started a whisper campaign that I'd stolen the house from my elderly parents. Never mind that my parents were in their 50s and perfectly capable. The narrative had been set. I unfriended. I blocked. I tried to create space. But the messages kept coming. One night, I sat on my apartment floor, reading through them, feeling the walls close in. I'd done everything right. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, saved their home, offered a fair solution, and somehow, I was the villain. The next evening, I came home from my waitressing shift, exhausted and reeking of fryer grease. I unlocked my apartment door and froze. Something was different. Wrong. I stepped inside slowly. My laptop was closed, but I'd left it open that morning. Papers on my desk were rearranged. My filing cabinet drawer wasn't quite shut. Then I heard voices from my bedroom, my heart pounding. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door and moved down the hallway. The bedroom door was open. Inside, Courtney and Brad were going through my things. Courtney had my filing cabinet open, documents spread across my bed. Brad was photographing them with his phone. "What are you doing?" My voice came out high and scared. They both spun around. Courtney didn't even look guilty. "We needed to see your financial situation, to make sure you're not lying about needing the house. Get out. Get out right now, or I'm calling the police." Brad held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Now, Francis, let's stay calm. How did you even get in here?" "The emergency key you gave Mom and Dad years ago," Courtney said, holding it up. "They let me borrow it. We were worried about you. You broke into my apartment. We let ourselves in out of concern," Brad corrected. "That's different." I looked at my bed, at all my private documents spread out. Bank statements, tax returns, my business plan for the medical billing company, personal journals, everything. Courtney picked up my business plan, flipped through it. "A medical billing company? That's your big dream? How sad." She actually laughed. "You're willing to destroy your family over this?" "Put that down," I said, my voice shaking. "Put everything down and get out." Brad casually snapped a few more photos. "We just want to make sure you're being honest with your parents. Family looks out for family, right?" "We talked to a lawyer, by the way," Courtney said, setting down my business plan but pocketing something I couldn't quite see. "About elder abuse. About how you manipulated Mom and Dad when they were vulnerable. Got them to sign over their house. That's illegal, Francis. That's a crime. I didn't manipulate anyone. The bank required it." "That's your story," Brad said. "But it's interesting, isn't it? Your parents lose everything. You swoop in, and suddenly the house is all yours. How convenient." They moved toward the door. I pressed myself against the wall to let them pass, not wanting them anywhere near me. At the door, Courtney turned back. "Think carefully about your next move, Francis. We have everything we need now." They left. I stood in my violated apartment, looking at my scattered documents, and felt something inside me break. I called a locksmith and had my locks changed that night. It cost $150 I didn't have to spare, but I couldn't sleep knowing they had a key. Only after the locksmith left did I realize what was missing. My social security card, my birth certificate, old tax forms with my mother's maiden name, my father's signature, all the information someone would need to steal my identity or open accounts in my name. I called Amy. She answered on the first ring, heard my voice, and said she'd be right over. While I waited, I made a list of everything I could remember them, photographing everything that was missing. The list grew and grew, and with each item, I felt the trap closing tighter around me. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was called into my supervisor's office. Janet had been my boss for 5 years. We had a good relationship, professional but warm. She'd written my last 2 performance reviews with glowing praise. Now she couldn't meet my eyes. "Frances, sit down, please." I sat, my stomach already sinking. "We've received some concerning complaints," she said, her hands folded on her desk. "Complaints? About what?" She pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. Inside were printed emails. Allegedly from my work email address. Allegedly sent to pharmaceutical companies, offering to sell patient information. My mouth went dry. "I didn't send these. They came from your work computer, your login credentials." "Then someone used my credentials." "Janet, you know me. You know I would never do this." She looked pained. "I want to believe that, Frances. But we have to take this seriously. Patient privacy is everything. If the board finds out we had a data breach and didn't act immediately, we could lose our license. So what happens now? I'm suspending you, effective immediately. With pay, while we investigate. IT is going to go through your computer, your email history, everything. If we find evidence that you did this, it's criminal charges. If we find evidence someone else used your credentials, we'll revisit. But until then, you can't be here." She called security. A uniformed guard I'd seen 100 times, a man named Dale who I'd always said good morning to, escorted me to my desk. My coworkers stared, whispered. I packed my personal items into a box while everyone watched. Photos of my parents from better times, a coffee mug Amy had given me, a small plant that was probably already dying. Dale walked me to the parking lot. "I'm sorry, Frances," he muttered. "This is just policy." "I know," I managed to say. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive home. When I got back to my apartment, I immediately called Amy again. She came over with her laptop, and we went through everything. "Look at the writing style," I said, pointing at the emails. "That's not how I write. That's Courtney. Those phrases, she uses them all the time. Can you prove it?" "No, but I know it's her. Or Brad. He works in tech sales. He'd know how to hack an email account." Amy bit her lip. "Frances, do you have any enemies at work? Anyone who might have done this?" "No. I keep my head down. I do my job. Everyone likes me. Or they did until this." "Then it's probably your family. But proving it will be hard." The suspension stretched on. Days without my main income. I picked up every waitressing shift I could get, but it wasn't enough. Then my car broke down. The transmission. $1,200. I didn't have it. I called around for quotes, found a cheaper mechanic who'd do it for $900. I had to dip into my business savings, the money I'd been so carefully accumulating. Watching that account drop made me feel physically sick. Then the mail came. A thick envelope, certified, requiring signature. Inside, legal papers, a lawsuit. My parents were suing me for financial elder abuse and unjust enrichment. I read the complaint 3 times, my hands shaking harder with each pass. They claimed I'd manipulated them into signing over their house, that I'd taken advantage of their desperation, that I'd isolated them from their asset, and now refused to return it. The suit demanded I transfer the deed to them immediately, or face criminal charges. There was a note paper clipped to the filing. Courtney's handwriting. Last chance to do the right thing. I called every lawyer I could find. The consultation fees alone were $200, $300 each. None of them would take the case without a retainer of at least $3,000. I didn't have it. Finally, I found a legal aid clinic. They assigned me to an attorney named George, who had 17 active cases and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "Okay," he said, scanning the complaint. "This is frivolous. They have no legal standing, but defending it will still cost time and money." "How much time?" "Court date is set for 3 weeks from now. That's right before my sister's wedding. Probably not a coincidence." He looked up at me. "Listen, Frances, I'll do my best. but legal aid is stretched thin. I can't promise we'll have time to prepare a robust defense. You might want to consider settling. Settling? But the house is mine. Sometimes it's cheaper to give people what they want than to fight them, even when you're right. I left his office feeling like the walls were closing in. No job, depleting savings, a car barely running, a frivolous lawsuit that would cost me everything to fight, and a sister who wouldn't stop until she'd destroyed me completely. That night, sitting in my apartment with my unpaid bills spread across the coffee table, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Francis? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes? This is the Riverside Events Center. We have a problem with your account. I don't have an account with you. You're listed as the guarantor for the Courtney Mitchell wedding reception. There's an outstanding balance of $15,000. If it's not paid by Friday, we'll be forced to cancel the event and pursue legal action. My blood ran cold. I never signed anything. We have your information on file. Social security number, driver's license. You're listed as backup payment if the primary defaults. The documents they'd stolen. Courtney and Brad had used my information to guarantee the wedding venue. I'd bet money they'd done it at other vendors too. That's identity theft, I said. I need to speak to your legal department. Ma'am, we just need payment. How you work it out with your family is your business. I hung up and immediately started making calls. The florist, the photographer, the caterer. Each one had my name, my information, my stolen identity, used to secure services. The total came to over $40,000. I could file a police report for identity theft, but that would mean accusing my sister and her fiancé of a crime. It would mean police, courts, delays. It would destroy any remaining shred of family relationship. More importantly, I realized with growing horror, it might not work. They'd used the documents from my apartment, documents I'd kept, that had my information. They could claim I'd given permission. Their word against mine. And I'd already been accused at work of selling patient data. My credibility was shot. I sat on my floor, bills and threatening letters surrounding me, and cried for the first time since this started. Real, ugly crying, because I'd finally understood. They were going to win. They'd systematically destroyed my job, my reputation, my finances, and my identity, and there was nothing I could do about it. The next morning, a notice came from the bank. I was 3 weeks behind on the mortgage. If I didn't catch up immediately, they'd start foreclosure proceedings. 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of double payments and 80-hour weeks, and I was back where I'd started. Worse, actually. Because this time, I had nothing left to fight with. I looked at the court date circled on my calendar. 7 days away. The wedding was in 10 days. I was out of options, out of money, out of hope. But I had one thing left. A small inheritance from my grandmother, who'd died 2 years ago. I'd put it in a separate account, untouched, meant for a true emergency. It was $800. Not enough to solve any of my problems, but enough for one thing. I called a private investigator I'd found online. His name was Danny. His rates were reasonable, which probably meant he wasn't very good, but he was what I could afford. I need you to look into someone, I said. My sister's fiancé. Something about him doesn't feel right. What kind of something? I don't know. That's what I need you to find out. Background checks run $800. I'll need it up front. I gave him my credit card number, the one that still had a little room left. How long will it take? Week? Maybe less. I need it in 5 days. I have court in 7. I'll do what I can. I hung up and stared at my phone. $800. The last of my safety net. Gone. Spent on a hunch that probably wouldn't pan out, but it was the only move I had left. The next day, I returned to work. Not to my old position, but to a new one. The investigation had concluded. They'd found no evidence I'd actually sold patient information, but they also couldn't prove someone else had used my credentials. The IT department suggested I'd been careless with password security. Janet called me into her office again. "We're willing to bring you back," she said, "but not in medical billing. There's an opening in records. Filing, data entry, basic administrative work. That's 3 levels below my current position. I'm sorry, Francis. It's this or nothing. The board isn't comfortable having you in a position with access to sensitive data. I needed a job. I needed income. The mortgage was due. What's the pay?" She named a figure that was $20,000 less than my current salary. 20,000. That was nearly half. "I'll take it," I said, because what choice did I have? So I started in records, filing papers, entering data from handwritten forms into the computer system, work that required no skill, no expertise, nothing I'd spent years building. My coworkers were kind but distant. Everyone knew about the investigation. Everyone had their own theories. I kept my head down and did the work. But at night, I ran the numbers. Even with the waitressing income, I couldn't make the mortgage payments. I was falling further behind. The house I'd killed myself to save was slipping away anyway. 3 days before the court date, my grandmother's birthday party happened. Grandma Rose had turned 90. Despite everything, despite knowing how the family felt about me, I went. Grandma Rose had insisted. She'd called me herself, her voice frail but firm. "You come to my party, Francis. I want all my grandchildren there." The party was at my parents' house. The house that was legally mine, that they'd been living in rent-free, that was now the subject of a lawsuit. I parked down the street and sat in my car for 10 minutes, gathering courage. Inside, the house was full of people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. The moment I walked in, conversations stopped. People turned to look at me, then they turned away. I made my way through the crowd. No one spoke to me. It was like I was invisible, or like I was a ghost, something they could see but refused to acknowledge. I found my grandmother in the living room, sitting in her favorite chair. Her mind wasn't what it used to be. Some days she was sharp as ever. Other days, she didn't remember her own children's names. "Grandma Rose?" I said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "Happy birthday." She looked at me with confusion. "Who are you, dear?" "I'm Frances, your granddaughter." "Frances?" She frowned. "I don't know any Frances." My cousin Rachel appeared at my elbow. "You should go," she said quietly. "You're upsetting her." "I'm not trying to upset anyone." "But you are, just by being here. Everyone knows what you did to your parents, what you're doing to Courtney." "Rachel, it's not what you think. I don't care what it is. This is Grandma's party. Don't make a scene." The other cousins had formed a circle. Literally formed a circle, their backs to me, shutting me out. I stood on the outside, watching them laugh and talk, watching them celebrate without me. Cousin Jennifer walked past, bumped into me hard enough to spill my drink. She didn't apologize. Cousin Marcus walked by next. He looked right at me and spit on the floor at my feet. I left. Just walked out of the house, got in my car, and left. I sat in a grocery store parking lot and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. My family had turned completely against me. Every single person. And there was nothing I could say, no evidence I could present, that would change their minds. That evening, another notice from the bank. I was now 6 weeks behind on the mortgage. They were starting foreclosure proceedings. I had 30 days to catch up on all missed payments, plus fees. The total was $7,000. I had $800 in my checking account. That was it. Everything else was gone. Spent on legal fees, car repairs, living expenses during the suspension. I was going to lose the house anyway. After everything, after 3 years of sacrifice, I was going to lose it to foreclosure. The irony was crushing. The court date arrived. I met George outside the courthouse. He had a slim folder with him, looked harried and unprepared. "Best case scenario," he said. "The judge dismisses the suit. Worst case, it drags on for months and costs you thousands more in legal fees." The hearing lasted 45 minutes. My parents' attorney was slick and expensive. The kind you hire when someone else is paying your bills. He painted a picture of elderly parents manipulated by a cunning daughter. George countered with the facts. I'd bought the house. It was legally mine. End of story. The judge looked bored through most of it. At the end, he ruled in my favor. The house was mine. Case dismissed. My parents' attorney immediately said they'd appeal. Outside the courthouse, my father stopped me. You could have avoided all this, he said. You could have just done the right thing. I did do the right thing, I said. I saved your house. I let you live there free. I offered a fair compromise. You're the ones who sued me. That's not how your mother sees it. That's not how Courtney sees it. How do you see it, Dad? He looked at me for a long moment. I saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or exhaustion. But then he shook his head. I see that your sister is getting married in 3 days. She's pregnant, and she still doesn't have a place to live because of you. He walked away. I stood on the courthouse steps, my small victory feeling hollow. I'd won the legal battle, but I was still losing the war. That night, Danny, the private investigator, finally called. I found something, he said. Can you meet? We met at the same diner, where Amy and I had gone weeks ago. A lifetime ago. Danny was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his shirt. He slid a folder across the table. Brad Morrison, he said. That's your sister's fiancé, right? Right. He's been married before. Twice. I opened the folder. Marriage certificates. Divorce decrees. Court documents. My stomach dropped as I read. First wife, Jessica Morrison. Married 2017. Divorced 2018. She filed for a restraining order. Claims of financial abuse and threats. He flipped to the next section. Second wife, Amanda Morrison. Married 2019. Divorced 2020. Also filed for a restraining order. Also claimed financial abuse. What kind of financial abuse? The pattern's the same both times. Brad marries a woman with assets or family money, gets access to the finances, runs up debt in their names, then disappears right before everything crashes down. I felt cold. What happened to the women? Jessica lost her business. Amanda lost her family home. Both are still paying off debt he left behind. Both say he's a con artist who specifically targets women with something worth stealing. Danny pulled out another document. Brad's current employer, TechFlow Solutions. It's a pyramid scheme. Technically legal, barely. He makes money by recruiting other salespeople, not by actually selling anything. And he's in debt up to his eyeballs. Credit cards maxed out. Defaulted on a car loan. Eviction on his record from 2 years ago. He told Courtney he had a good sales job. He lied. And here's the thing, Francis. 3 months ago, Brad pulled property records for your parents' address. He knows the house is worth $350,000. He knows it's free and clear. And based on his pattern, I'd bet money he's planning to marry your sister, get the house in their names, take out a massive home equity loan, and disappear. I stared at the documents. He's done this before. Twice that I found. Could be more. He's smart about it. Moves to new cities, uses slightly different names. Brad Morrison, Brad Morrissey, Bradford Morrison. Stays just on the legal side of fraud. What about the pregnancy? Danny pulled out one more piece of paper. I did some checking. Discreetly. No medical records for Courtney at any local hospitals or clinics. No OB appointments. No prenatal care. Nothing. Doesn't mean she's not pregnant. But if she is, she's not seeing a doctor. I sat back, the pieces clicking together. She lied. She lied about being pregnant to manipulate everyone. Or Brad convinced her to lie. Either way, this guy's bad news. I looked at all the evidence, court documents, financial records, statements from ex-wives. It was legitimate, provable, real. This could save me, I whispered. I could show this to my parents, to Courtney. They'd have to believe me. Danny grimaced. Maybe. Or they'll think you hired someone to fake documents. You're already accused of manipulating them, right? This could make it worse. He was right. If I brought this to them now, 3 days before the wedding, desperate and cornered, they'd never believe me. They'd think I'd manufactured evidence. Courtney would spin it as a final cruel attempt to ruin her happiness. But sitting there in that diner, looking at proof that my sister was about to marry a con artist who'd already destroyed 2 women's lives, I had a realization. I'd been fighting the wrong battle. I'd been trying to keep the house while somehow maintaining a relationship with my family. But those 2 things were incompatible. They'd made their choice. They'd chosen Courtney, chosen the fantasies she and Brad had sold them, chosen the easy lie over the hard truth. And I was going to lose the house anyway. The foreclosure was already in process. I had 30 days. I couldn't catch up on the payments. It was over. But I didn't have to hand it to them. I didn't have to let Brad steal it. I could end this on my terms. Danny, I said slowly, you found all this in 5 days? I'm good at my job. When I have time to focus on one case, could you have found it 2 months ago? If you'd been hired then? He thought about it. Yeah, probably. Why? Just wondering about timing. I paid Danny his fee, took the folder, and went home. I sat in my apartment with all the evidence spread out and made a new plan. Not a plan to keep the house. Not a plan to fix my family. A plan to walk away with my dignity and make sure Brad Morrison didn't destroy anyone else. The next morning, I called a real estate agent. The real estate agent's name was Patricia. She met me at the house the next day while my parents were out. I let her in with my key, feeling strange being in what was legally my house, but felt like foreign territory now. Patricia walked through, making notes. It's a good house, well-maintained. In this market, I'd say $350,000 easy, maybe more. I need to sell fast, as is, quick close. She looked at me sharply. How fast? 30 days or less. That'll cost you. You'll have to price below market to attract cash buyers. How much below? 315, 320,000. You'll get offers fast at that price. I did the math in my head. After paying off the remaining mortgage, paying Patricia's commission, paying the back payments and fees to stop the foreclosure, I'd net around 280,000. Not the 350 I'd hoped for. But enough. Enough to start over. Enough to be free. Do it, I said. List it today. Are your parents going to be a problem? I saw they're living here. The house is mine. Completely. I have the deed. The mortgage is in my name only. They're tenants at will. You'll need to give them notice. I will. After we have a buyer. Patricia listed the house that afternoon. Within 2 days, I had 4 offers. All cash, all quick close, all from people who didn't care about the family drama or legal complications. I accepted an offer from a retired couple, Helen and Walter Patterson. 315,000, 20-day close. The closing date would be the day after Courtney's wedding. I signed the purchase agreement, started the paperwork. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Courtney, not even Amy at first. I just moved forward, methodical and calm. I had 10 days until the wedding. 10 days to prepare. I went to see George at the legal aid office. They said they're appealing. What are my chances? The appeal? 0. You won. The house is legally yours. They have no case, but they could keep it tied up in court for months. They could try. But why would they? Unless they're being bankrolled by someone who enjoys wasting money on legal fees. Brad was bankrolling it, keeping me tied up, stressed, unable to move forward. Classic abuser tactic. What if the house sells before the appeal is heard? George blinked. You're selling? I have a buyer. Close in 20 days. A slow smile spread across his face. Then the appeal becomes moot. You can't transfer property that's already been transferred. If they want to appeal, they can appeal, but it won't matter. The house will belong to someone else. And legally, I don't have to tell them. Legally, no. Morally, he shrugged. That's above my pay grade. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I had a plan. I had an escape route, and I had evidence that would blow up Brad's con before he could execute it. But I couldn't just hand the evidence to my family. I had to be smarter. I had to wait for the right moment. The wedding rehearsal dinner was scheduled for the night before the wedding at an expensive restaurant downtown. Courtney had texted me the details weeks ago, back when she still thought I'd fold and give her the house. I wasn't invited anymore, technically. But I hadn't been uninvited either. I called Courtney 2 days before the dinner. She answered on the first ring. "What do you want, Francis?" "I'm calling to tell you I'll bring the keys to the rehearsal dinner." Silence. Then, "What?" "The keys to the house. I'll bring them to the dinner. You can give them to Brad then." "You're serious?" "I'm tired, Courtney. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of being the villain. You want the house? Fine. Take it. Family means more to me than property." I could hear the suspicion in her voice. Why now? Why the sudden change? Because I talked to a therapist. Because I realized I've been selfish. Because I don't want to lose my whole family over a house. Each lie came easier than the last. You're right. A baby needs stability. I had my chance and blew it. This is your time. More silence. Then, "You'll bring the keys to the dinner?" "I'll bring them to the dinner. In front of everyone. I'll make a speech if you want. Apologize. Make things right. I'm pregnant with your niece or nephew, Francis." "I know. Congratulations. I'm sorry I haven't been more supportive." She actually laughed. Light and victorious. "I knew you'd see reason eventually. Mom and Dad will be so happy." "I'm sure they will. See you at the dinner." I hung up and let out a breath. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I made copies of all of Danny's evidence. I practiced what I'd say. I packed my apartment, boxing up everything I wanted to keep. I'd already given notice to my landlord. After the closing, I'd take my money and leave. Start over somewhere new. A different city. A different life. Amy came over the night before the rehearsal dinner. I'd finally told her the plan. She'd been shocked, then impressed, then worried. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "You can't undo it once it's done." "I'm sure. They destroyed me, Amy. My job, my reputation, my finances. They stole my identity. They sued me. All because I wouldn't hand over the one thing I'd worked 3 years to save." "I know. But Francis, this is your family." "No," I said quietly. "Family doesn't do what they did. Family doesn't choose lies over truth. They made their choice. I'm making mine." She hugged me. "I'll be there if you need me. Just call." "I will." The day of the rehearsal dinner, I dressed carefully. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. Just a simple dress, minimal makeup. I wanted to blend in, be forgettable, right up until the moment I wasn't. I drove to the restaurant, the folder with Danny's evidence on the passenger seat. The keys to the house were in a small gift bag. Everything was ready. The restaurant was crowded. 50 people, Courtney had said. Family, wedding party, Brad's family. I recognized most of them. Saw the cousins who'd turned their backs on me at Grandma's party. Saw aunts and uncles who'd called me selfish. Saw my parents sitting at the head table, looking uncomfortable in their formal wear. And there were Courtney and Brad. Courtney in a white dress, glowing and triumphant. Brad in a suit, smiling his smooth smile, one hand possessively on Courtney's waist. I walked in. Conversation stopped. People stared. Courtney saw me, her face lighting up, not with joy, with victory. She stood, tapped her champagne glass with a fork. "Everyone, Francis is here. My sister has come to make things right." The room applauded politely, confused. I walked to the head table, the gift bag with the keys in my hand. Courtney met me halfway, pulled me into a performative hug. "Thank you," she whispered in my ear. "I knew you'd do the right thing eventually." She led me to the front, gestured for me to stand beside her and Brad. Brad was smiling, but his eyes were flat and calculating. He knew this was his moment, the moment he'd been working toward. Courtney made a speech about family, about forgiveness, about how grateful she was that I'd finally learned what really mattered. She talked about the baby, about building a life with Brad, about how excited they were to raise their child in the home where she'd grown up. People smiled and nodded. My parents were crying. Happy tears this time. Then Courtney turned to me. "Frances, would you like to say something?" I set the gift bag with the keys on the table in front of her. I would, actually. I pulled out my phone, where I'd loaded photos of all Danny's documents. "Before I give you the keys, I need to ask Brad something." Brad's smile faltered. "What?" "Tell me about Jessica Morrison." His face went white. "Or how about Amanda Morrison? Your second wife?" Courtney looked confused. "Second wife? Brad, what is she talking about?" I pulled out Danny's folder, set it on the table. Brad's been married twice before. Both marriages ended with restraining orders. Both women claim he conned them, stole from them, left them in financial ruin. Brad stood up fast, his chair scraping. "This is ridiculous. Frances hired someone to make up lies. Did I make up the court documents? The divorce decrees? They're public record, Brad. Anyone can look them up." I pulled out papers, spread them on the table. Marriage certificates, restraining orders, financial statements showing his debt. Courtney grabbed the folder, started reading. Her face changed, shifting from confusion to something harder. "Brad works for TechFlow Solutions," I continued. "A pyramid scheme. He's $70,000 in debt. He pulled property records for Mom and Dad's house 3 months ago. He knew it was worth $350,000, free and clear." "This is insane," Brad said, but his voice was shaking now. One of the women at a nearby table stood up. She was about 40, elegant in a navy dress. I'd noticed her earlier but hadn't recognized her. Now she was walking toward us, her face pale. "That's him," she said, pointing at Brad. "That's Bradford Morrissey. He stole $40,000 from me. Left me with $20,000 in credit card debt he'd run up in my name." The room erupted. Everyone talking at once. Brad backed toward the door. Courtney was reading the documents, her hands shaking. I turned to my parents. "You had a choice at every single step. I worked 3 years to save your house, 80-hour weeks. I gave up my 20s, my dating life, my dreams, and you chose Courtney's lies over my truth. You allowed me to be destroyed." My father tried to speak. I held up my hand. "The keys on the table? They're real. They'll unlock the doors. Until noon tomorrow." My mother frowned. "Tomorrow? What happens tomorrow?" "The house closes tomorrow at 10 in the morning. The new owners take possession at noon." Dead silence. Then Courtney screamed. "You sold it? You can't do that. This is my house. I sold a house that was legally, completely mine. The new owners are a lovely retired couple named Helen and Walter Patterson. They're very excited about it." Brad moved toward the door. One of the groomsmen blocked him. "Let me see that folder," the groomsman said. He was Brad's brother, I realized. "Brad, what did you do?" Brad didn't answer. He pushed past his brother and ran. Literally ran out of the restaurant. Courtney grabbed the folder, kept reading. Her face crumpled. "There's no baby," she whispered. I lied about the baby. Brad said it would make everyone feel sorry for me. He said it would guarantee we'd get the house. My mother made a wounded sound. I pulled out one more envelope, set it on the table in front of my parents. "This is a check for $10,000. It's my final gift to you. It's more than you deserve after what you did to me. But I'm not you." My father opened the envelope, stared at the check. "That's your share of my childhood," I said. "Consider us even." I walked out. Behind me, chaos. Courtney crying. My mother shouting questions. Brad's family demanding answers. I got in my car and drove away, watching the restaurant disappear in my rearview mirror. The next morning, I went to the closing. Helen and Walter were warm and kind. They were downsizing from a larger home, wanted something more manageable. They'd lost their son 2 years ago and were starting fresh, just like me. I signed all the papers. They signed theirs. The title transferred. I received a check for $315,000. Helen gave me a hug. "Thank you for this beautiful home. Take care of it," I said. "It deserves to be loved." We drove to the house together. Helen and Walter had a moving truck following us. When we arrived, my parents were on the lawn with suitcases. They'd been living there without any legal right, and now they had nowhere to go. My father saw me, started to walk over. I ignored him, focused on Helen and Walter, helping them with their first load of boxes. Walter, who I learned had been an attorney before retirement, calmly explained to my parents that they needed to vacate immediately. They had no lease, no legal standing. They were trespassing. My mother started crying. My father tried to argue. Walter remained calm and professional, reciting property law like he was reading a recipe. A car screeched up. Courtney jumped out. No Brad. She looked destroyed, makeup running, still in her wedding dress from the night before that would never be used. She saw me, ran toward me. "You can't do this. Please, Francis. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I got in my car, locked the doors. She pounded on the window, screaming. My parents stood helpless with their suitcases. The house they'd taken for granted, that I'd saved and they'd weaponized, now belonged to someone else. I drove away, for the last time. In my rearview mirror, I saw my destroyed family, the house I'd loved, and the life I was leaving behind. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment, 3 hours away in Portland. It was smaller than my old place, but it was mine. Really mine. No memories, no ghosts, just possibility. I'd used the money from the house sale carefully. First, I'd paid off all my debts. The bills Courtney and Brad had left in my name, I'd disputed and eventually resolved. Then I'd set up my medical billing company, just like I'd always dreamed. It started with just me, working from a desk I'd bought at a thrift store. I contracted with 2 small medical practices, handling their billing remotely. The work was steady, satisfying. I was good at it. I'd always been good at it. Within 3 months, I'd added a 3rd practice, then a 4th. The income wasn't huge, but it was enough. More importantly, it was mine. No one could take it from me. No one could demand I hand it over to prove my love. I hired my first employee in month 5, a woman named Lisa who'd just gotten her billing certification. She was eager, smart, grateful for the opportunity. We worked well together. By month 6, we had 6 clients, and I was looking into renting actual office space. The business was growing, not explosive but sustainable and healthy. Everything I dreamed it could be. My apartment had a small balcony overlooking a park. I sat there in the evenings with tea, watching people walk their dogs, watching kids play. Simple, peaceful moments that felt like luxuries after everything I'd been through. I'd blocked my family's numbers, but Amy kept me updated. The information came in bits and pieces, and I only asked because I needed to know they weren't plotting something new. The wedding had been canceled, obviously. The deposits were lost. Courtney had admitted to everyone that she'd lied about being pregnant. The shame had been enormous. Brad had disappeared the night of the rehearsal dinner. Warrants were issued for fraud in 2 states. No one had heard from him since. Courtney had filed for an annulment of their engagement, though legally that didn't mean much since they'd never actually married. My parents had to rent a small apartment. All their savings had gone to legal fees, wedding deposits, and funding Brad and Courtney's lifestyle. They were working past retirement age to make ends meet. Courtney had moved back in with them. She'd gotten a job at a retail store, her first real job in years. The cousins and aunts and uncles who'd sided with her so vigorously had quietly backed away when the truth came out. Some had reached out to me through social media, offering half-hearted apologies I didn't respond to. The extended family was fractured. Some realized they'd been wrong about me. Others still blamed me, claiming I should have warned them about Brad sooner, as if that would have changed anything. I felt surprisingly little about all of it. No satisfaction in their suffering, but no guilt either. Just a sort of peaceful indifference. They'd made their choices. I'd made mine. We were all living with the consequences. One evening, about 7 months after I'd left, Amy forwarded me a letter that had come to her office. It was from my mother. Brief, carefully worded. It didn't say sorry. It said they might have been hasty. It said they hoped I was well. It asked if I'd consider talking. I read it twice, felt nothing particular. No anger, no longing, no sadness, just tired recognition of too little, too late. I wrote back. 1 page. I said I wished them well, that I hoped they'd learned something from all this, but that I'd moved on. I didn't give my new address or phone number. I didn't offer to visit or talk. I just closed the door gently but firmly. That same week, I met Marcus. He was a teacher at a local middle school, and we'd literally bumped into each other at a coffee shop. He'd apologized, I'd laughed, and somehow we'd ended up talking for 2 hours. He was kind. That was the first thing I noticed. Not charming or smooth or impressive, just genuinely kind. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He talked about his students with real affection. He made terrible dad jokes and laughed at them himself. We started dating slowly. Coffee dates, then dinners, then long walks through the park near my apartment. I told him my story, the whole thing, expecting him to run. Instead, he'd taken my hand and said, "That took incredible strength. I'm glad you chose yourself." It was different with Marcus. Healthy. He encouraged my business dreams, celebrated my small victories, never took more than he gave. When I worked late, he'd bring me dinner. When I was stressed about a difficult client, he'd listen without trying to fix it. When I needed space, he gave it without making me feel guilty. It had been 8 months now. We weren't moving fast, and that felt right. We were building something real, something that didn't require me to sacrifice my dreams or my dignity. I thought a lot about what I'd learned. About family, about sacrifice, about self-worth. I'd grown up believing that love meant giving until it hurt, that family meant putting everyone else first, that saying no made you selfish. I'd been taught, though no one had ever said it directly, that my value came from what I could provide, that my role was to be the responsible one, the one who fixed things, the one who sacrificed so others could shine. Courtney had been taught the opposite, that the world owed her, that her wants were needs, that other people's job was to make her happy. Neither lesson was healthy. Neither of us had been done any favors. I'd spent 3 years working myself to exhaustion to save a house that was never really mine in the ways that mattered. Not because I legally owned it, although I did, but because home was never about the building. It was about feeling safe, valued, loved, and I'd never felt any of those things in that house. Not once in 3 years of sacrifice. I'd thought that if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, proved myself enough, my family would finally see me, would finally value what I did, would finally choose me. But you can't make people value you by giving them everything. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. And I'd tolerated too much for too long. Blood relation doesn't justify abuse, doesn't justify manipulation, doesn't justify stealing, lying, destroying someone's life and calling it love. Sometimes the family you need to protect yourself from is the one you were born into. And sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do is walk away. Walking away wasn't giving up. It was choosing myself. It was deciding that I mattered, that my dreams mattered, that my future mattered. Not more than Courtney's, but not less either. And choosing myself wasn't selfish. It was survival. I thought about the house often. Helen and Walter had sent me a card a few months after moving in. They said they loved it, that they'd planted roses in the front yard, that they felt at peace there. They invited me to visit any time. I'd cried when I got that card. Happy tears. The house had gone to people who deserved it, who would care for it, who would fill it with love instead of resentment. That felt like the right ending for it. My business got its first major contract in month 9. A hospital system, 3 locations, needed comprehensive billing services. It was more work than Lisa and I could handle alone, so I hired 2 more people, rented a small office, bought real equipment instead of making do with secondhand. The business had a name now. Evergreen Medical Solutions. I'd chosen it carefully. Evergreen. Like the trees that stayed strong through every season. Like resilience. I sat in my new office on the first day, looking at the sign on the door with my company name, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in what I'd endured, but in what I'd built. Not in how much I'd sacrificed, but in how much I'd created. This was truly mine. Built with my skills, my knowledge, my hard work, and no one could demand I hand it over. No one could claim they deserved it more. No one could manipulate me into giving it away. I'd learned that boundaries weren't walls. They were bridges to healthier relationships. The people who respected my boundaries got closer to me. The people who didn't respect them got distance. It was that simple. Marcus proposed in month 10. Nothing fancy, just the 2 of us on my balcony at sunset. He said he loved me, that he admired my strength, that he wanted to build a life together where we both could thrive. I said yes. Not because I needed someone to complete me or rescue me, but because I wanted to share my life with someone who saw me as a partner, not a resource to exploit. We planned a small wedding. Just us, Amy, a few friends. No family drama, no expectations, no performance. Just 2 people choosing each other freely, without coercion or obligation. Sometimes I thought about what I'd lost. A sister I'd loved, parents I'd tried so hard to please, an extended family that had been part of my identity. It hurt, that loss. Even now, even knowing they'd never truly valued me, it hurt. But I'd gained so much more. Peace, dignity, self-respect, a business I was proud of, relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. A partner who loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. I'd gained myself. The version of me that existed when I wasn't constantly trying to earn love by giving pieces of myself away. The version that could say no without guilt. The version that knew her worth. That was worth everything I'd lost, and more. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see while I was in the middle of it. The house was never really about the house. It was about proving I mattered. Proving that my years of sacrifice meant something. Proving that I was valuable enough to be chosen, just once, over Courtney. But I was asking the wrong people to validate me. I was seeking worth from people who'd already shown me, over and over, that they couldn't or wouldn't give it. My parents had raised 2 daughters with fundamentally different messages. They'd taught Courtney that she was special, that the world should bend to accommodate her, that her happiness mattered most. They'd taught me that I was valuable when I was useful, that love was earned through sacrifice, that my role was to support, not to shine. Neither message was love. Real love doesn't create hierarchies. Real love doesn't demand you destroy yourself to prove your loyalty. Real love celebrates your success instead of resenting it. I'd spent 30 years trying to earn something that should have been freely given, and when I finally stopped trying, when I finally set boundaries and walked away, I discovered something incredible. I could give those things to myself. I could validate my own worth. I could celebrate my own success. I could choose myself, protect myself, value myself. I didn't need their permission or approval. I never had. The business continued to grow. By the end of my first year, Evergreen Medical Solutions had 12 clients and 5 employees. We moved to a larger office space. I was making more money than I ever had at my old job, and I was my own boss. More importantly, I was creating opportunities for other people. Lisa, my first employee, was now my operations manager. She'd grown so much in confidence and skill. The other employees were thriving too. We had a healthy workplace culture, built on respect and clear communication. I thought about my old workplace sometimes, the job I'd lost when Courtney and Brad had framed me. I'd heard through professional networks that Janet had retired early, burned out. The medical billing department had high turnover now, hemorrhaging experienced staff. The company was struggling. I felt sorry for the patients whose billing was probably a mess, but I didn't feel sorry about leaving. That job had undervalued me for years. Losing it had forced me to build something better. Marcus and I got married in a small ceremony at a botanical garden. Amy was my maid of honor. Marcus's best friend from college was his best man. 20 people total. It was perfect. We honeymooned in Ireland, something I'd always dreamed of but never thought I could afford. We stayed in small bed and breakfasts, explored castle ruins, walked along cliff sides. Marcus took terrible photos and made me laugh until I couldn't breathe. When we got back, we moved into a house we'd bought together. Nothing grand, just a 3-bedroom ranch that needed some work. But it was ours, bought with money we'd both earned. A true partnership. We painted the walls together, planted a garden, adopted a dog from the shelter, a golden retriever mix named Copper, who thought he was a lapdog despite weighing 70 pounds. Built a life that was quiet and peaceful, and ours. I never heard from Courtney again. My parents sent one more letter, forwarded through Amy, about a year after the first. This one was more direct. They said they were sorry, that they'd made mistakes, that they hoped I could forgive them someday. I read it and felt a twinge of something. Not quite forgiveness, not quite closure, just acknowledgement that they'd finally understood, at least partially, what they'd done. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. I could forgive them for my own peace, while still maintaining distance for my own safety. The two weren't mutually exclusive. Amy told me later that my parents had downsized further, moving to a smaller apartment as they struggled with retirement finances. That Courtney had finally gotten serious about her career, working her way up to store manager. That the family had mostly fragmented, with holidays becoming smaller, sadder affairs. I felt neither satisfaction nor guilt about any of it. They were living their lives. I was living mine. The connection had been severed, and neither of us was trying to repair it. That felt like its own kind of peace. On the 2-year anniversary of the rehearsal dinner, the day I'd walked away from everything, Marcus and I had friends over for a barbecue. We grilled burgers, played yard games, laughed until our faces hurt. Copper ran around stealing dropped food, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. I looked around at the people in my yard. Friends I'd made in Portland, colleagues from my business, Marcus's teaching friends. People who chose to be here, who wanted to spend time with me, who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges. This was family. Not blood, but chosen. Not obligated, but willing. Not demanded, but freely given. I'd spent so long fighting for people who didn't want to be fought for, who resented my efforts, who saw my love as something to exploit rather than cherish. I'd thought that was what family meant. Enduring, sacrificing, giving until it destroyed you. But real family doesn't feel like destruction. It feels like this. Like laughter and support and mutual respect. Like knowing you matter, not because of what you can provide, but because of who you are. The business hit a milestone that second year. We signed a contract with a major hospital network, 15 locations. It required hiring 10 more people, moving to an even larger office, implementing new systems. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I thought about calling my parents to tell them. Old habits die hard. For just a moment, I wanted to share this success with them, wanted them to be proud, wanted that validation I'd always craved. But then I remembered. I didn't need their pride. I was proud of myself. That was enough. That had to be enough. And actually, it was more than enough. It was everything. I called Amy instead. She screamed with excitement, insisted on taking me out to celebrate. We went to a nice restaurant, ordered expensive wine, toasted to success built on our own terms. You did it, Amy said, raising her glass. Everything you dreamed of. I did, I agreed. And the pride in my voice was real and earned and mine. 3 years after leaving, I got a message through LinkedIn. Courtney. The message was brief. She said she was proud of what I'd built, that she understood now why I'd done what I did, that she hoped I was happy. I stared at it for a long time. There was no apology. Not really. No acknowledgement of the damage she'd caused. Just a vague statement of understanding that felt more like trying to make herself feel better than genuine remorse. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. Some relationships are healthier ended. Some people, even family, especially family sometimes, are better loved from a distance, or not at all. Closure doesn't always come from confrontation or reconciliation. Sometimes it comes from simply moving forward, from building a life so full and rich that the past can't touch it. I'd spent years being the responsible one, the one who sacrificed, the one who held the family together. I'd thought that was my role, my purpose, my value. But I'd been wrong. My value wasn't in what I could give up. It was in what I could build. Not for others, but for myself. Not through obligation, but through choice. Not from sacrifice, but from strength. The house I'd saved, that I'd worked 80-hour weeks to keep, that I'd thought defined my worth, it was gone. Sold. Belonging to someone else. And I didn't miss it. Not the building, anyway. What I missed, sometimes, was the fantasy. The idea of a family that valued me. The dream of parents who protected me. The hope of a sister who loved me. But fantasies and dreams and hopes aren't the same as reality. And reality had shown me, clearly and repeatedly, what they were. So I'd built my own reality. One where I was valued, protected, loved. Where my dreams mattered and my boundaries were respected. Where sacrifice was mutual and appreciation was genuine. It wasn't the family I'd been born into, but it was the family I'd chosen, and that made all the difference. 5 years later, I sit in my office at Evergreen Medical Solutions. We have 30 employees now, contracts with medical facilities across 3 states. The company is stable, successful, growing. Everything I dreamed it could be when I was working those 70-hour weeks, saving a house I'd eventually have to walk away from. Marcus and I have 2 children, a daughter, Clara, who's 3, and a son, Henry, who just turned 1. They'll grow up in a home where love doesn't come with conditions, where their worth isn't measured by what they can provide, where they're celebrated for who they are, not what they sacrifice. I think about my parents sometimes, about Courtney, about the family I left behind. The ache has faded to something distant, like an old injury that only bothers you when it rains. I don't wish them harm. I don't wish them anything, really. They're just people I used to know, living lives that no longer intersect with mine. Amy is still my best friend. She's the godmother to both my children. She stood by me through everything, never judging, never wavering. That's what real family looks like. Chosen, not obligated. Supportive, not destructive. I learned so many lessons from those dark years. Lessons I'm trying to pass on to my children, to my employees, to anyone who'll listen. I learned that family doesn't mean you're obligated to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. That blood relation doesn't justify abuse or manipulation or exploitation. That sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see your value. I learned that sacrifice is only noble when it's appreciated and reciprocated. That giving until it destroys you isn't love, it's martyrdom. That real relationships require balance, respect, boundaries. I learned that you can't make people value you by giving them everything. That the harder you try to earn love from people who won't give it, the more of yourself you lose. That some people will always take and never give, and teaching them otherwise isn't your responsibility. I learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish, that protecting your dreams doesn't make you a bad person, that saying no, setting boundaries, walking away when necessary. These aren't betrayals. They're survival. I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what actually matters. That the things you're desperately clinging to might be the very things holding you back. That letting go can feel like losing, right up until it becomes winning. Most importantly, I learned that my worth isn't determined by what I can provide to others. It's inherent, unchangeable, mine. I don't have to earn it through sacrifice or prove it through suffering. I simply have it, because I'm human, because I'm me. These lessons cost me. They cost me a family, a house, years of my life spent in pain and confusion. But they also freed me. They let me build a life that's truly mine, with people who genuinely love me, doing work that fulfills me. Was it worth it? Yes. 1,000 times yes. Because the alternative was continuing to live as a resource to be exploited, as a problem solver who never got to have problems of her own, as someone whose value was only recognized when they were giving something up. I look at my children and know I'm breaking the cycle. Clara won't be taught that she has to sacrifice her dreams for others. Henry won't be taught that his role is to fix everyone else's problems. They'll be taught that they matter, that their boundaries are important, that love shouldn't hurt. They'll be taught that family can be chosen as well as born, that sometimes walking away is the right choice, that their worth is inherent, not earned. Helen and Walter still send me cards at Christmas. We visited them once, about 2 years after they bought the house. They'd transformed it, painted it cheerful colors, filled it with warmth and laughter. It looked like a home in ways it never had when I was killing myself to keep it. "Thank you again," Helen had said, hugging me at the end of that visit. "This house, it gave us a fresh start when we needed one most." "It did the same for me," I'd replied, just in a different way. The money from selling that house built my business, bought my home with Marcus, created the foundation for the life I have now. Losing it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I wanted to lose it, but because it forced me to face the truth I'd been avoiding for years. My family didn't value me. The house was just a symbol of that larger truth. And once I accepted it, once I stopped trying to make them see what they refused to acknowledge, I was free. I've thought about reaching out to my parents, to Courtney, especially now that I have children of my own. Part of me wonders if they'd want to know their grandchildren, their niece and nephew. Part of me wonders if people can change, if relationships can heal. But then I remember the screaming, the lies, the lawsuit, the identity theft, the destruction of my career and reputation, the complete lack of remorse, until it was far too late. And I realize that some relationships aren't meant to be repaired. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I've forgiven them, in the sense that I've let go of the anger and hurt. I've accepted what happened and moved forward. But forgiveness doesn't mean inviting them back into my life. It doesn't mean risking my peace or exposing my children to people who've proven they can't be trusted. Sometimes love means protecting yourself and your family from people who would hurt you, even if those people share your blood. Especially if those people share your blood. The greatest gift I ever gave myself was permission to let go. Not everything worth saving can be saved. Not everyone who should love you will. But you can still build a beautiful life. You can still win. You can still thrive. I did all three. And I've never looked back. So what would I say to someone going through something similar? To someone being pressured to sacrifice everything for family members who don't appreciate it? To someone being manipulated, exploited, destroyed by the people who should protect them? I'd say this. You matter. Your dreams matter. Your boundaries matter. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep anyone warm. Not even family. Especially not family who demands it. Walking away isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. It's deciding you deserve better. It's recognizing that some people won't change, won't appreciate you, won't value you, no matter what you do. And that's okay, because your worth isn't determined by whether they can see it. It's there regardless. You just have to believe it yourself. The house, the family, the sacrifice, All of it taught me one fundamental truth. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of relationships that harm you, letting go of expectations that will never be met, letting go of the fantasy to embrace reality. And when you finally do let go, when you finally choose yourself, you'll discover something incredible. You were enough all along. You just needed to believe it. I believed it, and it saved my life. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Have you set boundaries that others called selfish? How did you handle it? I'd love to know your thoughts, so please share in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps others who need to hear this message find it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building the life you deserve. Share this with someone who needs to hear that choosing themselves isn't selfish, that their dreams matter, that they're not alone in facing these impossible choices. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brought you some comfort, some validation, or at least the knowledge that you're not alone. Whatever challenges you're facing with your own family, I hope you find the courage to do what's right for you. Remember, you deserve love that doesn't require you to destroy yourself. You deserve relationships built on respect, not obligation. You deserve peace. Take care of yourselves. Choose yourselves. You're worth it.